Lightning Spear Sorceress, definitely the fastest build in Season 7 of Diablo 4 for simple content. I will immediately note that my version of the build does not use any game bugs or snapshots. I specially posted 3 videos of passing the pits on my channel: 90 pit in 90 seconds, 100 pit in 2 minutes, and 115 pit, so that you can understand what this build is capable of. From these videos, you can see that this build is really the fastest build for any content that is easier than 90 pit, and the most amazing thing is that any content in Diablo 4 is easier than 90 pit, except for higher level pits. Cuirassed dungeons, Helltide, Infernal Hordes, Nightmare dungeons, all this is easier than 90 pit, and all this content on this build you will fly through faster than on any other. The problems with the build start in pits above level 90, it starts to lack damage. You can see that if I pass a pit of level 90 without stopping at all, then to pass a pit of level 100 I periodically have to stop, and also killing the boss in the pit of level 100 already starts to take a significant amount of time. Therefore, for example, for the pit of level 100, Leap Barbarian is faster than this build, but for any content below Leap Barbarian is inferior to this sorceress in speed. The highest pit I've passed on this build is 115. That's enough for me, but if you want to try pushing higher pits, you'll have to learn how to use snapshots and bugs. It'll be almost impossible to get higher on this build without it. My version of the build implies a normal game, without any tricks. So, let's move on to the build. The most important thing for the build to start working normally and you can teleport as often as I do is you need a lot of cooldown reduction. Therefore, first of all, you should pay attention to 4 items: the head, Harlequin crest, the ring, Tall Rosh's intended loop, legendary boots. Note that the boots must have a stat: attacks reduce evades cooldown, and the final touch. We get the last remnants of the cooldown reduction on the amulet, but we need masterwork the amulet as much as possible on primordial binding. This is the second most important thing, in addition to the fact that this is a talent that will give us the most damage, but also a high level of this talent solves all our problems with mana. While you do not have enough mana, instead of a ball lightning, you can use charged bolts. This skill requires much less mana. For the build to work properly, the teleport cooldown value in the enchant should be less than 3 seconds. At the moment I have this value as 2 seconds, but I will note that making the teleport cooldown even 3 seconds is not so easy. This build is very demanding of the quality of items and masterworks. How the build works: you need to constantly press the ultimate on cooldown, after that we just hold down the lightning ball button, and after that I can constantly teleport by pressing evade. I recommend putting the evade cast on the mouse scroll, it's very convenient. In my gear for farming low content this is enough, I don't need to press any other buttons. For farming high pits, or if your gear is not yet perfect, then you need to press all the buttons on cooldown, to maintain damage buffs. In general, that's all, there are no tricks in this build, everything works very simply. Let's move on to analyzing the items. Head, Harlequin crest, because this item gives us a huge amount of cooldown reduction. Chest, Shroud of False Death. Here, let's stop in more detail. If you look at other people's builds, you can often find the raiment of the infinite chest there. Why is that? I've even heard arguments to the point that +7 to glass cannon gives more damage than +1 to all passives on Shroud of False Death. This is not true, or rather not quite so. Everything depends on your current gear, but in terms of damage +1 to all passives and +7 to glass cannon are approximately equal. But nevertheless, for pushing high pits, I still recommend using Raiment of the Infinite because it gives us the opportunity to group opponents, and this speeds up the passage, but for regular content, Shroud of False Death is better, since in addition to damage, it gives us very high survivability, slightly increases the cooldown reduction, and helps with mana regeneration. Legendary gloves with stats, intelligence, attack speed, critical damage. I don't have the best gloves now. I recommend taking gloves with greater affix for critical damage or attack speed as a basis. Temperings, critical damage, and lucky hit, freeze. The best option for masterwork is critical damage on tempering, since there is more of it there than in the main stat. Aspect, Storm Swell aspect just for damage. Pants, Tebow's Will, best pants for damage. Boots, legendary boots with stats, intelligence, maximum life and armor. Also note that the boots must have the parameter, attacks reduce cooldown reduction. Without this our build will not work normally. Temperings, evade cooldown reduction and lucky hit, freeze. Aspect of the Orange Herald. This is very important, without it we won't have enough cooldown of ultimate, we need to press it every 10 seconds. Staff. Legendary staff with stats, intelligence, maximum life and critical damage. Better to have greater affix on critical damage than on intelligence. But it's even more important to have a high roll on the double damage lightning spear temperag, and to masterwork it. Second tempering, critical damage. Aspect of splintering erigi. This is the most important aspect that gives us the most damage, more than anything else in this build. Amulet, legendary with stats, intelligence, primordial binding and permafrost. You can change permafrost to inner flames or glass cannon, it's okay, there is no big difference between them. But the main thing is to have a maximum roll or a great affix on primordial bindings. Besides the fact that this stat gives us the most damage, it also solves our problems with mana. Temperings, critical damage and evade cooldown reduction. Rings gives us very much damage, it's Tal Rasha's intended loop and Ring of Starless Skies. On Tal Rasha's intended loop most important stat is cooldown reduction, on Starless Skies, attack speed. It would also be nice to have a star on lucky hit. This will help us reduce cooldown of ultimate and freeze enemies more often. Damage to frozen targets in this build is higher than to normal ones, but this is not very important. As enchantment we use Teleport and Frost Nova. Teleport is irreplaceable in this build, and instead of Frost Nova some players use Lightning Spear to have more spears, and Frost Nova in this version is casted with the help of runes, but I like the option with Frost Nova in enchantment more. Runes. We use runes in armor, Nagi, Ohm, and Igni, Vex. If you prefer to use Lightning Spear Enchantment you can change Vex to Thul. Gems. Orange in armor for intelligence. Green in weapon for critical damage. In jewel we use Pointed Finger, Friend of the Bog and Totaling's Wish. Witchcraft, Grow, Soul Harvest, Aura of Siphoning, Aura Specialization and Hex of Flames. This is all to maximize damage. As unique we take Piranhado to help us group our opponents a little. Talents. I will not describe everything in detail, you can find the full tree of talents in the description of the video. I will just note a couple of non-obvious things. In any case, we take the node Mystical Frost Nova, regardless of whether we have this skill on the panel or not. Even if we summon Nova with an enchant or rune, this node works for it. And also you may notice that I do not take the talent Mana Shield, which gives us a lot of survivability. I don't really need it, but if you need survivability, you can take 3 points in this talent, removing a couple of points from the ultimate, and removing a point from precision magic. Paragon. You can find the full Paragon tree in the description. Here I just say main things. Glyph in first deck, Control. Second deck, Elemental Summoner with Glyph Elementalist. Third, Searing Heat with Glyph, Tactician. Fourth, Static Surge with Glyph, Destruction. Fifth, Frigid Fate with Glyph, Eliminator. If you pay attention to the sorceress's paragon, you will understand that there are a lot of extra points left that have nowhere to go, and therefore I spent a lot of paragon points simply on gaining +5 to intelligence. Mercenary. We use Subo for extra critical damage and to have Mafik. And we take Variana for some attack speed. That's all, thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe.